Καλησπέρα και καλώς ήρθατε σε άλλη μια λέξη εκφραστικής ανάγνωσης εν μέσω κορονοϊού 2021. 2021. Wow. Οκ. Χαμένα. Πολύ χαμένα. Οκ. 2021. Ναι, λοιπόν, σήμερα θα σας διαβάσω τα αποσπάσματα από ένα πολύ αγαπημένο μου ιταλικό έπος του Λουντοβίκο Αριόστο. Είναι ο μενόμενος Ορλάντος, l'Orlando Furioso. Δεν είμαι σίγουρη αν υπάρχει μετάφραση στα νεοελληνικά. Υποθέτω ότι υπάρχει μετάφραση σε πιο παλιά εκδοχή της ελληνικής, αλλά δεν είμαι σίγουρη για τα νεοελληνικά. Και είναι κρίμα, για να πω την αλήθεια. Αλλά, εντάξει, πάλι προσωπική μου άποψη και ως γνωστόν τα δικά μου ενδιαφέροντα δεν είναι απαραίτητος τα ενδιαφέροντα που μιλάνε στο ευρύ κοινό. Τέλος πάντων, ο Αριόστο ήταν ένας τρομερά ενδιαφέρον τύπος. Μάλιστα είναι αυτός ο οποίος πρωτοχρησιμοποίησε την λέξη ουμανισμός στα Ιταλικά. Και το έπος αυτό είναι πραγματικά ένα υπέροχο, ρομαντικό κείμενο που έχει τα πάντα. Μάγισσες, τέρατα, υπότες, πριγκίπισσες, περιέργως και γυναικεία πρότυπα τα οποία είναι εξαιρετικά θετικά, θα έλεγα, για την εποχή που γράφτηκε το συγκεκριμένο κείμενο. Δεν αποτελεί έκπληξη το γεγονός ότι ενέπνευσε όπερες με το έργο αυτό ο Αριόστο και εγώ έφτασα στο έργο του μέσω της μπαρόκο όπερας, προφανώς. Και μία από τις αγαπημένες μου μπαρόκο όπερες είναι και η Αλτσίνα του Georg Friedrich Händel, έργο το οποίο το προτείνω ανεπιφύλακτα. Και η Αλτσίνα είναι μία από τις μάγισσες που εμφανίζονται στον Αριόστο και είναι δραματική η ιστορία της βέβαια. Δεν έχει happy end, όπως περισσότερες μάγισσες την εποχή εκείνη, αλλά και αργότερα. Και έτσι θα σας διαβάσω τα αποσπάσματα που αφορούν συγκεκριμένα την Αλτσίνα και τον υπότη Ρουτζέρο, ο οποίος καταφτάνει όχι από δική του υπαιτιότητα στο νησί της και πέφτει θύμα των μαγικών της ικανοτήτων. Η μετάφραση είναι της Barbara Reynolds, μια καλή μετάφραση, παλιά βέβαια, του 1973, αλλά είναι καλή. Okay. And when the bird, unswerving in its flight, had travelled on, traversing many a mile, weaving wide circles, weary now of height, it hovered low at last above an isle, just such a place where Arethusa might have lingered in concealment for a while when she had caused her lover grievous pain, and underneath the sea had passed in vain. No lovelier isle, no pleasanter it knew in all its many journeys through the air, nor even had it searched the whole world through would the great bird have found a land more fair. One last wide circle in the sky it drew, then with Rogero it alighted, where, mid cultivated plains and rounded hills, lush meadows, shadowed banks, and sparkling rills, welcoming groves of laurel, cool and soft, of palm and myrtle, fragrant and most sweet, and orange trees and cedar gently waft their perfume, as their fruit and flowers meet in myriad lovely forms which twine aloft a leafy shelter from the summer's heat. Among the branches, flying unafraid, the nightingales a dulcet music made. Among the roses, which cool breezes keep for ever fresh, and lilies white as snow, the hares and conies confidently leap, and proudly antlered stags unhurried go, fearing no trap or hunter in the deep recesses of the wood, or when with slow and peaceful gaze they ruminate, goats frisk, and every creature frolics without risk. While the winged horse had been approaching land, Rogero from a certain height had seen that it was safe to leave the saddle, and so found himself on the enamelled green. He kept the bridle firmly in his hand, then to a myrtle which he found between a laurel and a pine he tied the beast, for to secure it to the earth seemed best. Not far away he saw a spring, set round with cedars and date-bearing palms. He drew his helm and gauntlets off, and on the ground near by set down his shield. Next, on the view of sea and hills he gazed in turn. The sound of the caressing breeze which gently blew released a joyful murmuring and stir among the beech-tree tops and those of fir. From time to time, to cool his burning lips over the plashing fountain, clear as glass, he bends and from the crystal water sips. And to subdue the fire which his cuirass has kindled in his veins, his hand he dips and splashes in the pool. No wonder, as, without a pause, and armed as for a tourney, 3,000 miles he travelled on his journey. And as he tarries there, the hippogriff, which he has tied among the shady brakes, begins to kick and rear and plunge, as if it shied at some strange, lurking form. It shakes the myrtle so that every bough and leaf tosses and twists, and, round about, it makes a carpet of the mutilated fronds. And even so it cannot break its bonds. As when a log of wood, which once was green, of which the pith has shrivelled, leaving spaces where sappy softness formerly has been, is thrown upon the flames whose warm embraces convert to roars and groans the air within, as through the hollow aperture it races, so does that injured myrtle moan and shrieks, as through the splitting bark it tries to speak. A plaintive voice, no longer thus confined, issued at last, articulate and clear, and said, if you are courteous and kind, as from your noble aspect you appear, this creature from my tree, I pray, unbind. The suffering I undergo is drear and harsh enough. Let it not be increased by the infliction of this restless beast. Rogero, startled by this anguished cry, in great astonishment at once turned round, and on his senses scarcely dared to rely. He scrambled to his feet, and with one bound the hippogriff he hurried to untie. And when at last the power of speech he found, "O human soul, O woodland sprite," he said, "I pray you, pardon me," and blushed bright red. "Since I was unaware that you reside, a living spirit, hidden in this bark, I tethered my winged charger to your side, which on your fronds has sadly left its mark. But do not leave me thus unsatisfied, I pray you. Do not keep me in the dark, but tell me who you are. Do not fail, as you may sheltered be from snow and hail. If now or ever I can make amends to compensate you for the damage done, by her who holds my fate in her fair hands, and of my soul is the custodian, I swear that I will labour to such ends you will have cause to bless me." Whereupon, as soon as brave Rogero ceased to speak, from tip to root the bush began to shake. Along the rugged bark a moisture oozed, as when from a green firebrand the sap, yielding at last to the fierce heat, is loosed through many a tiny orifice and gap, and into sound converted, then disclosed the story of the spirit's sad mishap. By words so courteous I am induced to say by whom and why I am thus reduced. Astolfo was my name, a paladin of France, and on the battlefield much feared. Orlando and Rinaldo are my kin, as cousinly companions we were reared. After my father, Otto, I was next in line as King of England, so it appeared. Handsome and debonair, by many loved, my own worst enemy at last I proved. Returning from that archipelago which waters of the Indian Ocean lave upon the east, where I with Rinaldo and others were imprisoned in a cave, whence we were rescued, as perhaps you know, by the supreme endeavours of the brave Orlando, we travelled on towards the west along the lands by northern tempests vexed. Led on our weary way by cruel fate, we came one morning to a lovely strand, where stood near by the castle and estate of fair Alcina, ruler of that land. She issued at that moment from her gate. Alone upon the shore we saw her stand. Without a net, without a hook she fished, making as many catches as she wished. The dolphins at her call come quickly leaping, the tunnies flounder, gasping at her feet. Sperm whales and seals are startled from their sleeping. Mullet and salmon, pleasurable to eat, crowd in their hundreds, high and higher heaping. Pistresses with the auks swim forth to meet the visitors, the grampuses, the whales, in bulk gigantic and with thrashing tails. We see one mighty whale, larger than all the whales that ever swam in any sea, upon the surface, plainly visible, rising at least 11 paces. We, as to a man, into one era fall, for lying motionless it seems to be an island of proportions vast and wide, as from afar we scan it, side to side. Alcina drew the fishes from the waters by words and charms of which she knew the worth. She and the fair Morgana both are daughters of the same parents, whether at one birth I know not, and both sisters to King Arthur's. Alcina looked at me and showed no dearth of cunning. In such things she is skilled enough, as from the other nights she cut me off. She came towards us with a gracious smile, with courteous manner and disarming speech, and said, "Brave knights, pray linger here a while. Allow me to conduct you from this beach. To my abode I'll take you, and beguile you with my fish menagerie, of which I have a great variety, as bright and countless as the myriad stars of night. And if a siren some of you would care to meet, who with sweet singing calms the sea, explore that territory over there, where at this time of day she's wont to be." She pointed to the whale, and I, who dare all enterprises with temerity, and have a bitter reason now to rue it, without a moment's pause crossed over to it. Rinaldo and Dudone quickly signed to me that I should look before I leap, to no avail, for of her fell design I am now a captive, lost upon the deep. Alcina laughs, and her eyes with triumph shine. The whale, which knows her purpose, does not keep her waiting, but swims rapidly away, far from the mainland, to my great dismay. Rinaldo flung himself into the ocean to try to rescue me. He may have drowned, for there arose a furious commotion, stirred by the wind, and darkness wrapped us round. So what became of him I have no notion. Ways of consoling me Alcina found, and all that day and the ensuing night she kept me in her company or sight. So, speeding on the back of the marauder, we journeyed till we reached this island, where Alcina's sister reigned, as was in order, she being King Uther's only female heir. Alcina had not scrupled to defraud her, although, as many people are aware, she and Morgana are the fruit of incest. To this Rogero listened with great interest. They are as full of vile iniquity, being in sin and infamy well matched, as she who lives a life of purity to all the 7 virtues is attached. And so they mounted a conspiracy, and more than once an army they dispatched, with orders from her island realm to drive her, and of 100 fortresses deprive her. And scarce an inch of land would she possess. Her name is Logestilla, I should say, but for a gulf her sisters cannot pass, and rugged mountain peaks which bar the way, as Cheviot hills and Tweed create impasse, and Scotch and English forces hold at bay. And still this evil couple never rest, but every stronghold from her seek to wrest. This guilty couple are so filled with sin that Logestilla's virtue they both hate. But to resume how from a paladin a myrtle I became, I will relate. Alcina in great bliss now held me in her toils, and with a love insatiate she burned, and I enamoured was no less by every blandishment and sweet caress. And in her tender limbs I knew such joy, the sum of all delights it seemed to be, such as no lovers in this world enjoy, for bliss to few is granted copiously. No memories of war my thoughts employ, or come between her lovely face and me. Of her and of her only I'm aware, naught can I do but on her beauty stare. And I by her was loved as much, and more, and presently no need had she of others. To all her lovers she had shown the door. Before my time there had been many others. The office of adviser I soon bore, and I it was gave orders to the others. In me she trusted, and on me relied, and day and night I never left her side. Alas, my bleeding wounds, why do I probe, having no hope of healing medicine? Why do I bring to mind these memories of a happiness now vanished, as within a myrtle bush I languish in this grove? Just when I thought the sum of bliss was mine, just when it seemed most ardently she burned, Alcina to another lover turned. Too late I learn of her inconstancy. She loves or she loves not, as suits her book. Scarcely 2 months had passed, I think, ere she, as was her whim, another lover took, and from all confidence excluded me with many an unfriendly word and look. I later learned that she had likewise thwarted 1,000 others by whom she'd been courted. And lest her disappointed lovers spread report of this lascivious life of hers, she plants them in a very different bed, converting them to palm trees, or to firs, or olive trees, or cedars, or instead the lesser status of a bush confers, or turns them into animals, or streams, or any form that pleasing to her seems. Now you, who by some unaccustomed way have travelled to this Isle of Doom, my lord, on your account some wretched lover may be changed to stone or water at her word. On you Alcina will devolve her sway, and bliss beyond all mortal joy award. But be advised, the time must surely come when rock or tree or fountain you become. Such knowledge as I have I've gladly shared, although I doubt if it will much avail you. At least for what you'll find you are prepared. Forearmed, she can the less assail you. Perhaps, since I have told you how I fared, your own good sense and prudence will not fail you, and what 1,000 others could not do, defend themselves, will be achieved by you. Rogero had long known Astolfo's name, for he was cousin to the maid he loved. He grieved to find him fall into this shame, changed to a sterile plant and far removed from noble deeds which for a night win fame. For Bradamante's sake his heart is moved. He'd gladly rescue him if he knew how. All he can do is to console him now. He ministered such comfort as he could, then asked if there was any path which led to Logistilla's realm by which he would avoid Alcina, and Astolfo said there was another route, he understood, a rough and rugged, rock-strewn way to tread, a little further on than to the right and up a slope towards the topmost height. Let him not think, however, he will far advance along this path so harsh and steep, for he will meet an enemy who'll bar the way and with ferocity will keep the pass. Alcina's frontier guards they are, who bring to book whoever would escape. Then for the information he imparted, Rogero thanked the myrtle and departed. Untethering his mount, he held the rein and walked the creature slowly after him. He did not choose to ride on it just then, lest it take off with him another time. The right-hand path his purpose was to gain, and to the land of Logistilla climb. He was determined to use all his skill, not to fall captive to Alcina's will. Should he perhaps his winged charger take, and cross the mountain peak by means of it? He was afraid this might be a mistake, for it responded little to the bit. So then he thought, my way by force I'll make, if circumstance and destiny permit. Soon, 2 miles from the sea-coast, he beholds the lovely city which Alcina holds. A line of bastions has caught his eye, which rings the mighty citadel round. They are so tall they almost touch the sky, and from their topmost height down to the ground they seem to be of solid gold, and I am told by some that evidence was found of alchemy. However that may be, they glitter so, they look like gold to me. But when he saw those walls so rich and fair, in all the world their equal was unknown, he shunned the broad, unswerving highway which towards the portals would have led him on, and, hoping Logistilla's land to reach, turned to the right towards the hill, but soon a horde of deadly enemies engage all his attention with their frenzied rage. No stranger band of foes had ever been, no faces more repellent or distorted. Some, human downwards from the neck, were seen with cat or ape-like heads to be ill-sorted. Some, gambolling, made goat-prints on the green, and prancing centaurs round about cavorted. Some old and slow, some young, with urchin grins, some naked, and some clad in furs or skins. Some on a charger gallop to and fro without a rein, or on a donkey amble, or on an ox. On centaurs' backs some go, on eagles, cranes, and ostriches some scramble. Some drink from stirrup cups, some bugles blow. Female or male or both, without preamble, all kinds of tools and implements they brandish, rope ladders, pikes and shovels, all outlandish. The monster who was captain of this crew, his belly swollen and his lips distended, upon a turtle rode, with slow and few alternate steps its wrinkled feet extended. On this side and on that were ruffians, who, with kind solicitude, on him attended, for he was drunk. His brow and chin some mopped, some fanned, some held him upright when he flopped. One creature with a human trunk and feet, with canine neck and ears and proboscis, bellows and barks to make the knight retreat towards the city which behind him is. He answers, I'll surrender to no threat as long as I have strength to handle this. He shows his sword and turns the pointed end against his foe, his passage to defend. The monster tries to wound him with a lance. Rogero quickly presses the attack. He drives his weapon through its chest at once. 6 inches it protrudes behind its back. Then, shield on arm, makes ready to advance. His foe, alas, for numbers does not lack. They goad and harass him at every stride. He slashes, cuts, and thrusts on every side. Some to the teeth, some to the chine he cleaves. Thus the infernal race he decimates. They have no shields, no helmets, and no greaves, no coats of mail, cuirass, or armour plates. And yet, hemmed in, no headway he achieves, and the congestion which the horde creates. He needs, the enemies so numerous, as many arms as had Briareus. If he had been inclined to use the shield which to the sorcerer had once belonged, and which Atlante cunningly would wield, and many a brave knight with it had wronged, he could have rendered helpless on the field the brutish mob which round about him thronged. But it is well perhaps that he refused the aid of fraud, and only valour used. But, come what may, he'd rather contemplate his death than fall a victim to this host. Meanwhile there issue by the city gate, forth from those walls which golden splendour boast, two damsels who must be of high estate. So noble is their bearing, of such cost is their attire, no shepherdesses these, but ladies born to lead a life of ease. And each is mounted on a unicorn. Whiter than ermine these two beasts appear. The beauty of the garments which adorn the riders so enhances them, I fear no man in all the world was ever born who with undazzled vision could declare a judgment on their loveliness, which seems the embodiment of all our fairest dreams. And now they move towards the meadow grass, where brave Rogero battles with a band. The ruffians stand aside to let them pass. Each lady to the knight extends her hand, and with a rosy blush upon his face he thanks the damsels, who thus put an end to his ordeal, and gladly he agrees to pass the golden gate, if they so please. Above the portal was a pediment, and all its surface sculptured in relief. No part of it was lacking ornament, being encrusted, it is my belief, with precious jewels from the Orient. Four pillars give support, as hard as if in all their girth hewn from the diamond stone. No fairer, lovelier gate was ever known, and on the threshold, near the colonnade, alluring damsels sported winsomely. If more sedate decorum they displayed, more comely and lovely still they'd be. In garments of bright green they were arrayed, with coronals of leaves. Seductively, with beckoning gestures and with smiling eyes, they ushered in the knight to paradise. Nor would this be too fanciful a name for the abode where love, I think, was born, where every one in dance or joyful game the festive hours employed from early morn, where of sad thoughts no shadow ever came to spoil this rosebud life without a thorn. There no discomfort was, no cup was empty, but endless bounty from the horn of plenty. For here, as with serene and radiant brow, April, it seems, forever sweetly smiles. Young men and women to each other vow their love. One by a fountain sings, one whiles away the time beneath a leafy bough, one on a shady hill the hours beguiles, and one with a companion draws aside his thoughts of love the better to confide. Among the topmost branches of the trees, laurels and conifers, tall pine and beech, gaily rejoicing in their victories, small cupids flutter, chattering each to each, as if if a heart as yet untouched one sees, he shoots, or else, if it be out of reach, he spreads a net. Some to a stream are flown to temper dance or fight them on a stone. They gave Rogero a new mount, a bay, strong, spirited, though not for battle bred. With precious gems and finest gold inlay its harness was adorned. A stripling led the hippogriff. Accustomed to obey the sorcerer, it seemed content to heed the young attendant in that joyful place, and came behind at a slow, stately pace. The damsels, who had given timely aid when he was harassed by the ruffian band, which was ferocious opposition made, when he had tried the path on the right hand, as they rode onwards, turned to him and said, "My lord, your valiant deeds, we understand, have earned you much renown, and we would ask for your assistance in a certain task. A little further on there is a marsh, which you will see divides this plain in two. There Erifilla, cunning, fierce, and harsh, defends the bridge against all comers who desire to cross, if any are so rash. She is a monster, and gigantic too. Her fangs are long, and venomous her bite, and bear-like claws she uses in her spite. Not only in our way does she obtrude, which would be unencumbered otherwise, but often in our garden she'll intrude, despoiling it before our very eyes. And you must know that of that multitude beyond the gate, who fought you in such guise, a number she herself has brought to birth, the vilest offspring ever seen on earth." Rogero said, "This task I'll undertake, and hundreds more I am prepared to try. So if my humble self be pleased to make what use you will, and on my sword rely, I wore this coat of mail, not for the sake of conquest or of plunder, but that I may honourably serve the good and true, and most of all fair damsels such as you. The ladies duly thanked the cavalier. That he was chivalrous there is no doubt. Conversing in such manner, they drew near the bridge and marshy tract, where he must rout a giantess, whose golden trappings were adorned with emeralds and sapphires. But to my next canto I must now postpone Ruggiero's battle with this evil one. He who has left his native country sees, as further off he goes, things far removed from what he thought to find, and when he is recounting them at home may be reproved for telling lies, since ignoramuses, unless with touch and sight they've plainly proved a thing, will not believe it. Thus it comes, this canto will seem strange to stay-at-homes. However that may be, I have no need to bear the inexperienced in mind. To you alone, my lord, do I pay heed, who follow clearly all the threads I wind. And I shall feel well recompensed indeed, if of my labours sweet the fruit you find. I left you with Ruggiero in the field beside the bridge which Erifilla held. Her shining armour is a splendid sight, sparkling with gems of many different hues. Vermilion ruby, yellow chrysolite, green emerald, tawny jacinth, nothing loose of brilliance in the dazzling eastern light. And for a mount a horse she does not choose, but sits astride a wolf, alert and keen, upon the richest saddle ever seen. I doubt in all Apulia there howls a wolf so large in stature like an ox. No jerking rein with spume has flecked its jowls. I know not if with gestures or with looks she spurs or checks it when it runs or prowls. A sandy-coloured surcoat, like the frocks which prelates wear at court, completes the dress of this accursed, monstrous giantess. This gruesome being, on her shield and crest, flaunted a poisonous and swollen toad. As he prepared to undergo the test, the damsels to the brave Ruggiero showed where she would gallop with her lance in rest, to harass and impede him on his road. And now with deadly menaces she cries, his spear in hand her challenge he defies. With no less readiness her wolf she spurs, behind her saddle bow she crouches close. Her lance in rest she places in mid-course, making the terrain thunder as she goes. Beneath her helmet with heroic force, Ruggiero flings his spear and overthrows her. And beyond, behind her mount she passes, landing 6 yards away among the grasses. At once he draws the sword with which he is girt, to cut the head of the proud monster off. As well he may, for there she lies inert, among the flowers and the emerald turf. But both the damsels call, "Pray do not hurt her further, that she is vanquished is enough. And so, brave cavalier, put up your sword, and let us cross the bridge." Without a word Ruggiero acquiesced. The way they tread is rocky, harsh and rough, and through a dark and gloomy wood a narrow path they tread. Then next along a mountain track they hark, and when they reach the summit far ahead, they come at last upon a spacious park, where a fair palace beautifies the green. No lovelier in all the world was seen. The fair Alcina from the outer gate comes forth to meet the knight. In royal style she welcomes him and ushers him in state within the court, where thronging courtiers smile upon the cavalier and indicate, by bowing deeply, scanning him the while, how they revere him. Scarce more honour could they pay if court himself before them stood. The palace, of all palaces most fair, excelled in rich adornment less, in truth, than for the comely personages there, all courteous and noble, none uncouth. To one another all resemblance bear, all in their prime, all in the flower of youth. Alcina's the most beautiful by far, as by the sun outshone is every star. Her person is as shapely and as fine as painters at their most inspired can show. Her long fair tresses, which in ringlets twine, more brightly than spun gold appear to glow. White lilies in her tender cheek refine the rosy tints which softly come and go. A brow serene of polished ivory completes a face of perfect symmetry. Beneath 2 finely pencilled eyebrows, Dark as are the brilliant eyes they frame, her glance, compassionate, will lingeringly mark the target where love's arrows, not by chance, will accurately strike until the spark becomes a flame. So many he implants. And down the centre is a nose so sweet, envy itself can find no fault with it. Below, her lovely mouth, as if between two dimpled veils, is set, which nature's tints as though by cinnabar incarnadine. Parting to speak, her lips reveal the glints of pearls, and shaping gracious words, they win all hearts, be they as adamant as flints. So sweet a smile they form that in this wise they open here on earth a paradise. Her round and shapely neck is white as snow, her bosom, pure as milk, is large and full. Two ivory breasts, firm as young fruit, below her body smooth, as when soft breezes pull the waters at the margin to and fro. Her other parts would be invisible even to Argos with his 100 eyes, but from their rest their beauty we surmise. Comely proportions her 2 arms display, long, tapering and slender, as is fit, her hand is seen to be, and white as whey. No blemish or defect disfigures it, and where her dainty person ends, there play her elegant and sweetly modelled feet. Angelic semblances from heaven hail, and cannot be concealed by any veil. In every part of her there lurks a snare, in all her movements, words, or songs, or smiles. No wonder, then, if the brave cavalier enamoured is of one who so beguiles and so enchants him, and, although aware, thanks to the myrtle, of her evil wiles, he cannot now believe that base deceit can be concealed behind a smile so sweet. He'd rather now believe that the transfer to plant life of Astolfo and the Strand was a just punishment for deeds that were so evil that he had been rightly banned. And he now thinks that all he heard of her is false, by a desire for vengeance and a spiteful envy prompted. In his eyes, Astolfo's story nothing is but lies. The image of the maid whom he so loved was in his heart no longer to be found. The sorceress by magic has removed all trace of any former amorous wound. By her alone the cavalier is moved, by her his heart engraved. So, on this ground, Rogero must exonerated be of any blame for his inconstancy. Within the palace, banqueting in state, where harps and lyres and diverse instruments make all the air with harmony vibrate, ladies and cavaliers lend audience to courtly entertainers who relate stories of love and joyful incidents, and all their art and skill exert to please with poetry, romance, and fantasies. What sumptuous boards to feast a victory, such as was held by monarchs of Assyria, or Cleopatra offered Antony, was ever more elaborate and merrier than this Alcina caused the knights to see on entering her palace's interior. I do not think that such a feast indeed was served to Jupiter by Ganymede. When all the viands have been cleared away, the company assembles in a ring, and there a merry game begins to play, whereby each to the other whispering mysterious and secret words they say. And this for lovers is a useful thing. Not a few couples, by the evening's end, agree that they'll the night together spend. Much earlier than usual that night, the game broke up, and guests for bed prepared, in rooms where pages put the dark to flight by flaming torches, which with day compared. Taking his leave of friends to left and right, Rogero to his resting place repaired, a welcoming and sweetly fragrant nest, of all those well-appointed rooms the best. And when with fine liquors and candied sweets the hospitality is renewed to some, and with deep reverent bows each one retreats, and every one at last has gained his room, Rogero slips between the perfumed sheets so fine they're worthy of Arachne's loom, and to the passing footsteps now lends ear, hoping his fair enchantress he may hear. At every little movement which he heard, thinking it might be she, he raised his head. Sometimes there was a sound, sometimes he erred, and then he sighed. Sometimes he left his bed, and round the door, holding it open, peered, but no one could he see. The hoped-for tread was not forthcoming, and this long delay occasioned disappointment and dismay. Often he murmured, "Now this must be she," and in his mind he'd count the steps along the passage from his room to that whence he supposed Dulcinea would emerge ere long. And many such conjectures constantly did he indulge in, all of which were wrong. He greatly feared lest twixt the cup and lip there might occur some unexpected slip. But when Alcina scented with perfume, judged that the time was ripe, but not before, and all at last was silent as a tomb. Deciding that she needed delay no more, with quiet steps she glided from her room and, passing down a secret corridor, reached the apartment of the cavalier, his heart in turmoil between hope and fear. When the successor to Astolfo sees those radiant and joyful star-like eyes, with flaming sulphur all his arteries are as on fire, and he, for all he tries, the golden moment instantly must seize. So, leaping from the bed on which he lies, her person to himself he closely presses, and scarcely can he wait till she undresses. Although no gown, no underskirt she had, for only in a silken negligee over her night apparel she was clad, soft, white, and elegant in every way, beneath his hands this garment she now shed. Her nightgown, as transparent as the day, concealed her rounded limbs as little as the stems of lilies in a crystal vase. Never did ivy press or cling so close, rooted beside the plant which it embraced, as now in love each to the other does. And on their lips a sweeter flower they taste than Ind or Arabia knew, or those which on the desert air their perfume waste. To speak of all their bliss to them belongs, who more than once in one mouth had two tongues. All that takes place between them in their love, how they beguile the ensuing nights and days, is secret, or at least not spoken of, for lips are readier to blame than praise. All pay him homage, showing they approve, for in her palace every one obeys her wishes and behaves as she desires. Thus all to favour the affair conspires. No lack of pleasure causes them distress, for in this fair abode all joys they find. 2 or 3 times a day they change their dress, for many different purposes designed. Always they hold themselves in readiness for banquets, jousts, and feasts of every kind. By shady hills, or where the fountain plays, they read of lovers in the olden days. Now in deep vales, now over sunny slopes, they chase the hare, or else with well-trained hounds they make the pheasant rise from out the copse, by beating bush and stubble with loud sounds. Now bird-lime spread, and now with plaited ropes, where the sweet-smelling juniper abounds, lay traps for thrushes, now with nets or hooks they probe the fishes from their hidden nooks. For that benign and wise enchantress who has taken Bradamante to her heart, since she would be the ancestress she knew of heroes, nay, of demigods in part, ponders each day what she will say and do, for by the medium of her magic art she's seen Rogero freed, but gone alack to India, whence he has not come back. She's seen him riding on the flying horse, which neither by the rein nor with his foot can he control. It takes him quite off course along a dangerous and unknown route. She knows that now in idleness and worse he lives, and all his time in the pursuit of pleasure spends, forgetful that his word is pledged to both his lady and his lord. So now he wastes the flower of his youth, and in unending idleness this night would have consumed his soul and body both. And that which lingers when the rest is quite defunct, the fragrant residue, in truth, of all our virtues, which, in death's despite, preserve us from the oblivion of the tomb, would have dispersed upon the wind like fume. But that kind sorceress, who had more care than he had for himself, now planned how she might pull him up a hard and rugged stair, against his will, to virtue's victory, just like a good physician who will dare to cure with poison, knives, and cautery, and though in the beginning he gives pain, the patient thanks him when he is well again. She had no special tenderness for him, not like Atlante, who was blind with love. That foolish sorcerer had but one aim, to keep Rogero from all danger of an early death, or risk to life and limb, and to this hope tenaciously he clove. For all the fame Rogero might have won, of the knight's years he would not barter one. He sent him to the island of Alcina, that he might lose his conscience at her court. Of many necromancers none was keener in all the wily practice of his art. By means of it he'd brought about between her and Rogero an amour of such a sort as freedom he would never have achieved if longer than King Nestor he had lived. But turning now to her who can foresee the future, both of persons and events, she goes directly to the path where she anticipates with wondrous prescience that she will meet the maid. and instantly all Bradamante's anguish and suspense are turned to hope. But then she hears the truth. Alcina's magic has enslaved the youth. The maid is near to death when the kind fay has told her the extent of the disaster. Not only is her love so far away, and remedies needed all the faster, but he is captive to Alcina's sway. The other, where the pain is puts the plaster. She promises the maid that she will see her dear Rogero in 2 days or 3. Since, lady, she began, you have with you the magic ring, which every other spell can counteract, I know that I can do what is required to bring to naught her fell design, and your beloved from her woo. You can rely on me to make all well. I'll start this very evening on my way, and be in India at break of day. She tells her how she means to keep her troth, how she will set about her wily plans to rescue him from decadence and sloth, and bring him safely back once more to France. The maid gives up the magic ring, and both her heart and soul she'd offer to advance the scheme, would any sacrifice have made if she could lend her dear Rogero aid. So to the sorceress she yields the ring, and to her skill entrusts Rogero's fate, and many loving greetings bids her bring. Then for Provence departs, where she will wait. The enchantress conjures up a wondrous thing, a horse, 1 foot bright red, but black as jet in all its other parts. So great her skill, she summons such phenomena at will. I think it was a sprite or farfarel who thus was metamorphosed as a horse. The fay, barefooted and ungirt as well, her hair dishevelled, started on her course, and lest the ring should counteract the spell, she took it off and slipped it in her purse. Faster she rode than man had ever seen her. By morn she's on the island of Alcina. And there miraculously she changed form. Over a palm in stature first she grew, her legs and arms she altered to conform as in proportion to her height was due. Guessing Atlante's size, she chose the norm of all the necromancers whom she knew. That done, she draped a beard about her chin, furrowed her brow, and wrinkled all her skin. Her imitation of Atlante's face, of his whole aspect, manner, gait, and style, is so convincing she could take his place and raise no smallest doubt. First for a while she judges it is prudent to efface herself and patiently the time beguile. So in the gardens she resolves to hid until Alcina leaves Rogero's side. Soon, by good luck, she found him quite alone, taking the fresh and limpid morning air along a lovely stream which trickled down the hillside to a lake serene and clear. The exquisite attire which he had on was soft and sensuous, an idler's wear, woven in silk and gold with subtle touch by her who held him in her evil clutch. A splendid chain he wears about his neck, glittering with gems it reaches to his breast. 2 shining bracelets now his arms bedeck, alas, once of all arms the manliest. 2 little threads of gold his earlobes prick, forming 2 rings from which the loveliest of pearls are hung, one dangling at each ear, finer than Indians or Arabs wear. From curling tresses scented with pomade, a costly and delicious fragrance came. So amorous was every move he made, it was as though, to his undying shame, a servile courtship all his life had paid to women of Valencia. His name alone remains unaltered, nothing else, so greatly is it changed by magic spells. The enchantress in Atlante's form appeared, in face and aspect venerable and grave, such as Rogero ever had revered, and just such glances of reproof she gave as from his boyhood upwards he had feared. And she began, "Is it for this I have devoted all my energies to you? Is this the fruit I am entitled to? Was it for this on marrow bones I fed you of lions and of bears? And as a child was it for this along ravines I led you, hunting for snakes to strangle in the wild? Was it for this I hardened you and bred you, to render tigers, boars, and panthers mild? Of all this, do you think the aim alone is to be Alcina's Attis or Adonis? Is this the man whose destiny I've seen in sacred entrails, stars and points combined, responses, auguries, and dreams, and in all signs by which the future is divined, in which, alas, my years have squandered been, for whom courageous deeds of such a kind have been predicted since his infancy, that never would his prowess equalled be? Do you think Alexander sank so low? Do you believe that this method is a Caesar to become, or Scipio? Who would have thought you capable of this? You are Alcina's slave. That all may know, she makes you wear her chain and liveries, and at her pleasure everywhere she goes. Now here, now there, she leads you by the nose. She whom you make a queen, what has she got more than 1,000 whores, that you're enraptured? You know full well what is the final lot of all those whom this concubine has captured, that you may clearly see the evil plot, and whom it is by whom you are denatured. Take now this ring, and put it on your finger. Return to her, and see how long you linger. Stricken by shame, Rogero, as though dumb, hung down his head and knew no what to say. Holding between her finger and her thumb the magic ring of which she spoke, the fay slipped it upon his little finger. None before, his senses spring to life straightway. Aware now of his state, he is beside himself, and longs for a deep hole in which to hide himself. And in a flash the enchantress broke her spell, and reassumed the shape she always wore. For, now that her design had worked so well, she did not need Atlantes any more. The time has come, I think, her name to tell, Melissa, which I have not divulged before. A full account she gives Rogero now of who she is, and why she came, and how. She tell him she is sent by the fair maid, who longs for him and cannot live without him, to cut the chain by which he is captive made, wound by Alcina's magic art about him. Atlante of Carina's form, to aid her in her strategy, she took to rout him. But now that to his senses he's returned, she wants the truth by him to be discerned. That valorous fair maid, who loves you so, and who in all respects deserves your love, to whom, if you do not forget, you owe such freedom as you're not divested of, sends you this magic ring, which, as you know, protects the wearer from all spells. To prove her true devotion, she would gladly send her heart as well, if that would matters mend. Thus does the sorceress her theme pursue of Bradamante's love for him, commending her valour as a woman warrior too, affection with the truth perhaps contending, her case as loyal messengers should do, with every means at her command defending, until at last Rogero for Alcina conceived such hate, no hatred could be keener. And now, as once he loved her, he abhorred her. Nor is it strange that he has thus awoken, since by her spell it was that he adored her, which by the magic ring he wears is broken. To what she truly is, it has restored her, of sorcery annulling every token, and from her tresses to her feet and legs, all beauty's gone, and nothing's left but dregs. And as a boy who hides a fruit away and then goes off, forgetting all about it, on finding it long afterwards one day within a drawer or cupboard where he'd put it, astonished at the sight of such decay, is more than willing now to do without it, and takes the putrid thing with mould encrusted, and flings it far away from him, disgusted. So did Rogero when his former lover was altered by the ring which, when it's worn, undoes all other magic spells discover, though to her loveliness he could have sworn that underneath her magic mask and cover, no greater shock it had since he was born, she was an aged and a hideous crone. No uglier in all the world was known. In truth, Alcina was, without a quibble, wrinkled and frail. Her hair was sparse and white, and from her toothless mouth there ran a dribble. Scarcely 6 palms did she attain in height. Older than Hecuba or Cumae's Sibyl, she had outlived all other women quite. By means of artifice unknown to us, a girl she could appear, and beauteous. She makes herself so young and beautiful that many, like Rogero, she has snared. But now the ring enables him to pull away the mask which has so long impaired men's vision. It is then no miracle that brave Rogero, who this madness shared, is sane again. No magic can avail her, and all her beauty's remedies now fail her. But as Melissa has advised, he shows no sign of his emancipation yet. Much to the palace armoury he goes, his helmet and his harness thence to get. And when he has rearmed from head to toes, Alcina's mind and heart at rest to set, he feigns to try his skill, which he displays like one who has not fought for many days. Next his good Balisarda he put on, such is the name Rogero's sword possessed, then took the shield which blinded everyone, or with acute bewilderment oppressed the senses of all those on whom it shone. Atlante thus his enemy suppressed. Its dazzling surface silken folds bedeck, he hangs it, thus concealed, around his neck. Then in the palace stables he commands the saddling of a horse as black as pitch. This is the one the sorceress intends. She knows how it responds to spur and switch. Its name is Rabicano to its friends. It once belonged to the sad myrtle, which, a plaything now of winds along the strand, the giant whale had carried to this land. He did not choose the winged destrier, which close to Rabbicano had been tied, for the enchantress said to him, "Take care, that animal is dangerous to ride." She promised she would bring it to him, where they might essay some practice flights, and guide the hippogriff with bridle and with bit, until at last he learnt to master it. To leave the hippogriff likewise averts suspicion from the flight which he prepares. In all Rogero does, the Fay exerts an influence, and guides him unawares. The aged hag's abode he now deserts, that soft unmanly palace without cares. A gate in the side wall he means to breach, whence Logestilla's kingdom he may reach. Approaching the portcullis, he surprised the guards. He slashed and he thrust, he hit out blind. Some he had killed, some wounded, he surmised. Across the bridge he galloped like the wind, and long before Alcina was advised, he left her 6 miles behind. Alcina, who has meanwhile heard the news of how Rogero forced the outer gate and killed a number of her guards, reviews, dismayed, the desperation of her state. She rends her clothes in torrents of abuse. She blames her own stupidity too late. Straightway she sounds the signal for alarm, and gives commands for all her host to arm. Into 2 sections she divides them. One she sends to catch Rogero in his way. The others to the harbour mole have run to embark on sailing ships without delay. The azure of the ocean turns to dun beneath the spreading canvas. Her dismay seems to have robbed Alcina of her senses, to leave her city thus without defences. As no one watches the abode or grounds, this gives Melissa, who intends to free the prisoners in which the place abounds, every convenience and facility of the fell premises to go the rounds, inspecting all devices thoroughly. Seals, knots, ropes, spirals, images she finds. She breaks, she burns, she loosens, she unbinds. This done, across the meadowlands she hastes, where in their hundreds former lovers wait, changed into fountains, rocks or trees or beasts. She reconverts them to their former state. Not one of them a single instant wastes. As soon as they can walk, they emulate Rogero, who to Logestilla flees, thence make for Persia, Scythia, India, Greece. To her who thus releases them once more, the thanks they owe can never be repaid. The first of those her magic powers restore to human semblance is the Duke who bade Rogero be advised, the one who wore a myrtle's shave, for whom Rogero made a special plea, and that the Fay might bring him to his former self, gave her the ring. So with his kind entreaty she complies, and to his former shape the English Duke restores. And yet Melissa is in no wise will rest content until by hook or crook she finds his golden lance, which, as it flies unerringly, its victim brings to book. From Argalia Astolfo won this lance, for both it earned renown throughout all France. The lance was taken from him by the witch, and in some secret palace cupboard stowed, with all Astolfo's other weapons, which were stolen likewise in that dread abode. Melissa found them all without a hitch. Taking Astolfo pillion, off she rode, and while Rogero an hour's journey still has, making good time, she reaches Logestilla's. Among harsh rugged rocks and thorny brakes, to gain the kingdom of the virtuous queen, now this way and now that Rogero takes. No lonelier, wilder landscape has he seen. After great labour, at long last he makes, at the day's hottest hour, a shore between the ocean and the mountain, facing south, a region of sterility and drouth. The nearby mountain wall in the sun's glare throws back a blaze of heat so furious, it liquefies the sand and turns the air to fiercer blast than a glass furnace house. All birds in the rare shade are silent there. Only the cicada's monotonous refrain, rising where the desert plants abound, fills hills, dales, sky, and sea with deafening sound. Along that sandy, sun-exposed terrain, the sole companions in his journeying, Rogero knew were heat and thirst and pain. Irksome indeed he found such labouring. Well now, Rogero's tale I take in hand. Just when the rays of noon most fiercely burn, his weary charger plods along the strand. The sunbeams strike the mountain and return, like molten metal is the fine white sand. The armour which he wore, as like as not, most on his tortured body seem red hot. Meanwhile his thirst, the weary exercise of wading through deep sand, the lonely way did little to relieve the enterprise, or make his journey any the more gay. An ancient fortress rose before his eyes beside the sea, and in its shadow lay 3 ladies of Alcina's court, as he from their demeanour and attire could see. Upon Egyptian carpets, rare and fine, in the cool air they sweetly take their ease. Around them beakers of refreshing wine were spread, with every viand that might please, and near them, bobbing gently on the brine, a little skiff was waiting till the breeze should fill its idle, lifeless sails again, for not a breath of wind was stirring then. The damsels, who have watched Rogero pace the shifting sands with slow and painful steps, see how the sweat is pouring down his face and thirst is sculpted on his crusted lips. And they begin sweet words to interlace, to lure him from the steadfast path he keeps, and towards the shadow make him turn aside, to rest his weary body from the ride. So by his stirrup one now takes the stance, to help him to dismount, being her design. Rogero sees another then advance, bearing a goblet full of sparkling wine, but to such music he is loath to dance. Delaying so, disaster would combine, giving Alcina time to come too close, for she's not far behind, as well he knows. No sulphur or saltpetre ever flashed, touched by a flame, nor blazed so furiously. No raging ocean ever tossed or thrashed, tormented by a whirlwind ceaselessly, as when they saw Rogero, unabashed, proceed upon his way unswervingly. The beauty, as they deemed it, shunned and scorned, the last of the 3 damsels raged and burned. "You're neither courteous nor a cavalier," thus she began Rogero to revile. "That horse is stolen, and the arms you bear you likewise came by in no honest style. I'd like to see you hanged for it, I swear, burned at the stake, quartered and drawn, you vile, ungrateful, thieving, ugly miscreant, of all the villains the most arrogant." These were the words the angry damsel said, with many other insults, all the more since he, quite unperturbed, no answer made. No glory in such combat he looked for. Then, with the other 2 the frenzied maid entered the boat which waited by the shore. With rapid strokes she rowed, and level kept as onward through the sand the charger stepped. Cursing and calling on him every ill, she finds at every thrust some point of shame. Nor did she cease from her attack until at last Rogero to the Narrows came, where to a fairer sorceress he still aspired to cross. Preceded by his fame, he is awaited by a little ship on which the pilot beckons him to step, and joyfully casts off the mooring rope, to take Rogero to a better shore. If the expression of a face gives scope to judge the heart, this pilot offers more than many other men good cause to hope. Rogero, once on board, is grateful for God's help and offers thanks. Then to the wise and prudent boatman's words himself applies. He praised Rogero for his timeliness in thus withdrawing from Alcina's clutch, before she gave him, in her wantonness, a chalice of a magic potion, such as rendered all her lovers powerless. In Logestilla's land, where they'll soon touch, virtue and grace and beauty he will find, which feed but never satiate the mind. They saw approaching down the waterway a fleet of ships towards them, it seemed, directed. Alcina, who was ready for the fray, had troops to her assistance had collected, determined on a single throw to play all her resources for her love rejected. Love was indeed a reason for her cause, though the affront to pride made matters worse. Not ever since the day when she was born, but by such calamity had she been stirred, as by the blow inflicted by his scorn. The rapid oars across the surface whirred. To this shore and to that the spray was borne, and thundering echoes all around were heard. "Rogero, take the cover from your shield, before you perish, or your freedom yield." Such were the boatman's words, who not alone on words relied, for in an instant he detached a silken sheath, and forth there shone the magic beam, of which the potency confounded every foe it played upon. First one and then another blindingly it dazzles, till each man is seen to drop, some from the prow, still others from the poop. A soldier who was keeping sentinel had seen the coming of Alcina's fleet. With mighty hammer clangs he rang the bell, which summoned the artillery to greet the foe with fusillades of stones, which fell on whatsoever miscreant saw fit to seek to harm Rogero. This his life and freedom were defended in the strife. A group of women gather on the shore, sent by Queen Logestilla in all haste. Andronica, the bravest of the 4, Phrynesia, with highest wisdom graced, Dicilla, the most virtuous, and more significant, the radiant and chaste Sophrosyne. The army from the fort has issued and is drawn up near the port. Below the citadel at anchor lay a fleet of many vessels of great size, ready at any time of night or day at the first sound of bells or warning cries. Thus fearful and ferocious is the fray which on both land and sea will now arise. Alcina, with no magic to assist her, will lose the kingdom taken from her sister. Of how few battles is the outcome plain! Ah, what surprises fortune can combine! Not only did Alcina not regain her fleeing lover, as was her design, but of her fleet, so dense upon the main, scarce was there room for it to stand in line. Flames having now consumed all other ships, upon one craft, dejected, she escapes. She flees, and her ill-fated company have died by burning or are prisoners. Yet of them all, the worst calamity is that Rogero is no longer hers. By day, by night, she grieves most piteously, her loss lamenting, shedding bitter tears, and many times she longs with her own hand to all her suffering to put an end. But sorceresses cannot ever die, long as the sun revolves and planets tread in age-long style their pattern through the sky, else Clotho had been moved to cut her thread. Such grief Alcina is tormented by, that she would gladly imitate the deed of Dido or the Nile's resplendent queen, but hers the power to die has never been. Calavrai.